At dawn, the skies over Europe carried a metallic hum, the low growl of engines rising from mist-covered airfields. It was the sound of a war that had moved from trenches to the heavens, where victory would soon be measured not by the ground conquered, but by the miles flown and the seconds gained. For German fighter pilots, the air had once belonged to them. In the early years of the war, they ruled that domain with unmatched mastery, their Messerschmitts slicing through clouds with surgical precision. Their confidence was absolute, their supremacy unquestioned. But by 1943, that certainty had begun to crack. Somewhere beyond the horizon, a new shape had entered the war, sleek, distant, and impossibly fast. Its wings caught the light in a way that seemed almost unnatural, a flicker of silver, gone before a man could blink. The German pilots called it simply Der Teufel mit Flügeln, the devil with wings. The Americans called it the P-51 Mustang. Born from necessity, perfected through desperation, the Mustang was never meant to be a legend. It began as an experimental idea, a plane designed to fill a shortage, nothing more. But when British engineers fitted it with the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, something miraculous happened. Metal met design in perfect equilibrium. It climbed higher, flew faster, and endured longer than anyone thought possible. A beauty built for speed, and speed built for survival. And when the Mustang finally took to the skies of Europe in force, the balance of the air war tilted forever. In that moment, the hunters became the hunted. The skies between France and Germany turned into a brutal theatre of pursuit. Thousands of Allied bombers thundered eastward, escorted by these new silver phantoms. At over 400 miles per hour, they could protect the bombers deep into enemy territory, something no fighter had ever done before. For the Luftwaffe, accustomed to cutting through slower formations like knives, the change was disorienting. Their seasoned aces, men who had once laughed at the clumsy P-40s and Spitfires, now found themselves outclimbed, outturned, and, above all, outrun. Many could scarcely believe what they were seeing. The Mustangs came from nowhere, one German pilot would later recall. They appeared behind us even when we thought the sky was clear. In those words lies the quiet terror that crept into the hearts of once invincible men. The recognition that technology had shifted the ground beneath their feet, and that their era was ending, not with defeat on a battlefield, but with a streak of silver passing overhead. The P-51 was not just an aircraft, it was a message that speed itself had become a weapon, and that mastery of the air no longer belonged to Germany. For the men who flew against it, the sight of a Mustang shimmering in sunlight meant something close to inevitability. They could fight bravely, they could die beautifully, but they could not win. Still, there was wonder even in fear. To those who survived, memories of those encounters became almost mythic. The way the Mustangs seemed to dive from the stratosphere, how their wings sang against the wind, how a single moment of hesitation could decide life or death. The aircraft moved as though it carried the will of history itself, pushing forward the age of speed that would soon define the century. In its polished frame, men glimpsed both their triumph and their obsolescence, and so the war in the skies evolved into something more than a struggle between nations. It became a contest of momentum, of innovation itself. Factories and laboratories became new front lines. Engineers worked against time, designing faster engines and sharper aerodynamics, while in cockpits, young men lived out those experiments in seconds, measured by altitude and fear. Every encounter was a duel not just of skill, but of era. The older guard clinging to glory against a generation armed with the future. From the ground, villagers would look up and see them crossing the clouds like streaks of light, the Messerschmitts curving like dark hawks, the Mustangs slicing through contrails, dazzling white against the sky. To those below, It was terrifying and strangely beautiful all at once. Mechanical ballet at the edge of mortality. Yet, to the pilots themselves, it was a world of fragments, spinning steel, and fleeting choices. A sky too vast to hold compassion, yet intimate enough to taste death in a heartbeat. As the months wore on, the air became choked with debris and smoke, a graveyard for machines and men alike. The Luftwaffe's seasoned aces dwindled. New recruits climbed into cockpits with trembling hands, aware they would not return. Somewhere among the clouds, the Mustangs roared past, fast, merciless, resolute. The German pilots would stare after them, awe and disbelief mingling in silence. In that instant, they understood that the horizon itself had changed shape, and that Germany's empire in the air was dissolving into vapor. This was more than the tale of a fighter plane. It was the story of how speed remade war, how engineering and imagination fused to shift the balance of power and hasten the twilight of tyranny. The P-51 was proof that progress, once unleashed, cannot be contained. That once humankind learns to fly faster than fear, old empires will fall from exhaustion trying to catch up. And yet behind every victory lies the same unspoken cost. The pilots on both sides, staring into the same blue void, feeling the same rush of wind against their faces, asking the same question each time they survived a mission. What does it mean to dominate the skies, when every conquest leaves you one heartbeat away from silence? The story of the Mustang is not only about how a machine changed the course of war, but how man confronted the limits of his own creation. For those who witnessed it, those who fought against it, and those who flew within it, the sound of the P-51 remains more than an echo of history. It is the sound of the moment when courage met innovation, and the human race stepped into an age where the future moved faster than fear itself. But that was only the beginning. For as the Mustangs soared higher and farther, both ally and enemy would come to realize that victory in the air would demand more than speed. It would demand the soul of those who dared to chase it. By early 1944, the European sky had become a vast and merciless battlefield, a place where machines chased shadows and men aged years in minutes. The Luftwaffe still fought with ferocity, its aces legends among their own ranks. Names like Hartmann, Barkhorn and Rahl whispered with reverence. For years they had been kings of the air, trusted by their nation and feared by their enemies. Yet now, in the upper reaches between cloud and sunlight, they began to meet a new adversary, one that did not fight by familiar rules. The P-51 Mustang arrived gradually, almost quietly. At first, a few squadrons escorted bombers only partway into enemy territory. But soon, their range grew, first to Berlin, then beyond. Suddenly, no distance was safe. German pilots who had once waited near the front lines to ambush bombers now found themselves pursued deep into their own skies, hunted by aircraft that seemed tireless. "They follow us everywhere," one Luftwaffe officer wrote, as if the air itself has chosen sides. The secret, of course, lay in the Merlin engine that roared within the Mustang's sleek frame. Its endurance was astonishing, its breath unbroken, even at high altitude. Allied airmen called it their guardian angel. German observers compared it to a hawk, graceful at a distance, deadly in its descent. Pilots flying Messerschmitt Bf-109s or Focke-Wulf 190s watched the silver aircraft dive from impossible heights, guns blazing, and wondered how such speed could exist. "It came at us like a thought," recalled one. "We had no time to react, only to vanish or die." For American bomber crews, the change was almost miraculous. Before the Mustang, their journeys through German airspace were ordeals of endurance. Squadrons of B-17s and B-24s, lumbering through endless daylight raids, had faced slaughter without mercy. Tens of thousands of airmen never returned. Then came the P-51, racing beside them, circling above their formations like tireless sentinels. For the first time, the bombers could push deeper into the Third Reich, with hope of returning home. Entire missions passed without the devastating losses that once defined them. Morale swelled. The air war had changed course, but progress never arrives without fear. For young German recruits climbing into their cockpits, the legend of the Mustang became something almost mythic, a tale whispered in training fields and mess halls. They were told to expect it, to outmaneuver it, to trust their weapon's agility over its enemy's speed. Yet when the real encounter came, no instruction could prepare them for what they saw. At first, I thought it was a reflection, one pilot wrote in a letter never sent home. Then I realized the reflection was alive, and it was coming straight for me. Dogfights unfolded like flashes of lightning, beautiful, terrifying, fleeting. In seconds, the sky filled with streaks of tracer fire and the deep growl of engines straining against the limits of air and gravity. A German ace might dive, twisting through cloud banks to lose his pursuer. But the Mustang would follow, gliding downward in near silence, emerging behind him just as the sunlight broke. And then there was no escape. It was a battle measured not in kills, but in glimpses, in the breath caught between one heartbeat and the next before metal met flame. Still, courage remained. Many Luftwaffe pilots refused to surrender the sky. They fought as shadows of their former glory, haunted by dwindling fuel and fading supply lines. Some even admired the machine they fought against. The Mustang was perfect, admitted one after the war. We knew then that the war was lost, not because our spirit failed, but because theirs had learned to fly faster. The P-51 was more than a weapon. It was the embodiment of industrial symphony, craftsmanship, mass production, and the will to innovate, moving as one. Factories in California, Texas, and New Jersey turned metal sheets into dreams that could climb to 30,000 feet. Each rivet held the sweat of laborers, who may never have seen battle, yet these hands forged victory in aluminum and flame. In this invisible alliance between engineer and pilot, the war gained a heartbeat that pulsed with progress itself. In the cockpit of a Mustang, men tasted a strange kind of loneliness. At 400 miles per hour, the world narrowed to vibration, wind, and instinct. The oxygen mask pressed hard against their skin. Their fingers trembled between metal and fate. They looked down and saw columns of smoke stretching across the continent, the marks of cities burning below. Up here, superiority was cold comfort, fast, precise, merciless. Victory became something abstract, measured by turns and timings, not by the feel of triumph. For the Germans below, each raid brought new devastation. Towns that had stood for centuries crumbled overnight. The air that once promised freedom now carried fire. To them, the Mustang was not a miracle, but an omen, a herald of a world hurtling towards its end. And for the men who still flew the black-crossed wings, there was no time to mourn. Each sortie risked death, each landing felt borrowed. Hope narrowed to survival. By late 1944, the Luftwaffe was breaking apart. Fuel shortages, lack of seasoned pilots, and endless bombing runs stripped the Air Force of its strength. Yet still they flew. Some climbed into cockpits with barely 10 hours of training. They rose into skies already owned by Mustangs and Thunderbolts, vertical streaks against impossible odds. They were young, frightened, and sublimely brave. The Mustang pilots, though victors, carried their own weight of conscience. They saw parachutes bloom below them like white scars on a wounded country. They watched fires spread through cities once bright with life. They knew that every act of dominance in the air rippled downward into tragedy on the ground. And somewhere in that realization, they began to feel the deep contradiction of progress, that every technological triumph leaves behind an echo of sorrow. When Germany finally crumbled, the sky fell silent. Debris of war littered fields and meadows where children would one day play. Wreckage of Messerschmitts rested beside fragments of Mustangs that had fallen in pursuit. The sky that once decided empires now held only birds and clouds again. Pilots from both sides, those who survived, would carry the weight of that silence for the rest of their lives. In post-war interviews, many German veterans spoke of the Mustang with respect rather than hatred. They described its sound as unforgettable, the whistle of death that was strangely pure, almost beautiful. American pilots, in turn, remembered their adversaries not as monsters, but as men who shared their courage and their fear. In that mutual recognition, history softened. The air that separated them in battle now bound them in memory. And perhaps that is the quiet truth beneath the statistics and glory, that war teaches velocity, but peace teaches meaning. The Mustang helped end a tyranny, but it also revealed the danger of worshipping speed without wisdom. In the years that followed, the jet age dawned, turning the lessons of the P-51 into blueprints for a new world. Faster, louder, more distant. Yet behind every new machine, the echo of those wartime skies remained, reminding mankind that even progress must answer to compassion. As veterans aged and time thinned their numbers, the legend of the Mustang lived on. Restored in museums, roared back to life at airshows, shimmering across generations who would never know the fear of a dogfight, only the nostalgia of speed. Somewhere, standing beneath one of those gleaming wings, an old German pilot once murmured that when he first saw a Mustang, he thought it was the future. And he was right. That future, born in blood and iron, carried both promise and warning. It showed what greatness humanity could reach and what cruelty it could enable. The P-51 Mustang had soared as a symbol of victory, but also as a mirror, reflecting the heights and depths of the human spirit itself. And as the smoke cleared and the world learned to breathe again, the question lingered through the silence of a new dawn. In mastering the speed of flight, had mankind truly risen above its own shadow, or had it simply found a faster way to fall? And when the engines finally quieted and the last contrails dissolved into the pale blue of the post-war sky, an era had ended. The thunder that once ruled the heavens gave way to a silence almost sacred, a silence heavy with memory. Across Europe, once blackened fields grew green again. Forests returned where airstrips had scarred the land. But for those who had looked up into that sky, who had chased or been chased within its shifting clouds, the sound of the P-51 Mustang never really faded. It remained in the mind like a pulse, a reminder of mankind's fierce genius and of the price paid for it. To the German pilots who survived, the war became a ghost that followed them home. Many spoke not of hatred or defeat, but of awe, the haunting beauty of the silver plains that had outrun them, the strange relief at no longer having to fight an enemy who seemed invincible. A few confessed admiration for the Mustang's elegance, for its flawless union of strength and grace. They could acknowledge now what they could not then, that the enemy had built a machine so perfect it redefined the very meaning of their superiority. For those men, recalling it decades later, the image of the P-51 descending through sunlight was both memory and reconciliation, a vision of the war's terrible beauty, carried on wings too fast to forget. For the Americans, the Mustang was a symbol of mastery. It was the tool that escorted their bombers home, the promise that faith in innovation could overcome tyranny's cruelty. And yet, victory brought little joy to those who had fought from its cockpit. They remembered the sight of enemy planes bursting into fire, the drifting parachutes, the sudden quiet in their radios. They had learned something few would ever understand, that even triumph can weigh heavy when purchased through loss. Thousands of Mustangs never returned. Many more pilots did not live to see peace. The price of speed was measured in youth. History often remembers machines before it remembers the men. The P-51 is displayed today in museums, its metal polished to a mirror shine, its nose painted with the colors of squadrons long disbanded. Children point, photographers pause. The crowd sees a relic of glory. But behind every rivet and every streak of silver is a human story. Of engineers who dreamed faster than fear. Of pilots who touched the edge of mortality. Of enemies who found, in that shared danger, an unexpected mutual respect. Above all, it is the story of how humankind, in racing toward the future, must always look back to measure what it has lost. The air war over Europe was not merely a contest of machines. It was a mirror reflecting the soul of an age that worshipped progress. The Mustang became a symbol not just of technical victory, but of moral reckoning, proof that our capacity for creation walks hand in hand with our power to destroy. As the world rebuilt itself, the jet age began, and the skies filled once again with faster shapes and louder engines. But somewhere, deep beneath that roar, lingered the question the Mustang had asked first. How far can we go before speed outpaces wisdom? In the decades after the war, veterans from both sides met again, not as combatants, but as old men. They embraced. They spoke of missions once fought at impossible speeds, of near misses and small mercies, of the strange peace that had come only after the noise faded. One German ace described shaking the hand of his former American adversary and thinking, "We both survived the storm the world built." And in that gesture, perhaps, lay the quiet victory neither side had expected. The triumph of understanding over vengeance. Today, the few surviving Mustangs still fly, their wings gleaming in sunlight, engines rumbling like the breath of distant thunder. They no longer fight, they perform. Graceful arcs through calm skies, reminders of all the velocity, courage and tragedy compressed into their design. When spectators look up, they might see only a relic of mechanical perfection. But for a heartbeat, the sky itself remembers. It remembers what it felt like to hold the fate of nations in its clouds. The world that emerged from those burning skies is faster, smaller, and more connected than ever. A place built on the marriage of curiosity and consequence. The legacy of the Mustang is written not only in the blueprint of modern aircraft, but in the spirit of those who dare to push beyond limits, even knowing the cost. Its story is not one of glorifying speed, but of respecting it, understanding that progress demands humility, and that every leap forward should be balanced by the wisdom of restraint. Standing beside the restored fuselage of a P-51, one can trace a hand along its cool surface and imagine the lives it carried. The same plane that once soared through fire now rests quietly under open light, its silence deeper than any victory parade. What remains is a whisper of wind across metal, a sound that says something simple and profound. Humanity survives not by domination, but by remembrance. Time has aged the men, dulled the propellers, erased the trails of war. But memory endures, in the sky's vast silence, in the stories told by those who came back, and in the awe still felt when that engine stirs to life after 70 years. The Mustang's lesson is not about power or precision alone. It is about the fragile miracle of creation itself, how something built to destroy can inspire the deepest reflections on what it means to be alive. So as we look upward now, into peaceful skies that once burned with battle, we might hear a faint echo of that past. The distant thrum of wings cutting through eternity, the sound of courage, of fear, of invention, the sound of history racing against itself and finding, for a brief and brilliant moment, flight. Time may dull the roar of its engine, but the memory of those silver wings and the men who flew them will never fade. For in the endless expanse above, where war once devoured the light, the echo of the Mustang still lives, reminding us that humanity's greatest heights are always shadowed by its own reflection.